Well, let's move forward. I'll do this really quick, and then I'll go back to, I'll unshare my screen, and then I'll be able to go back to the tile mode, and you should be able to as well. I just wanted to really quick mention that before I was able, for all the students present, before I was able to book Betty and confirm her, the alternate plan for today was to talk a little bit more about subtext. So there are a reading assignment. There's a couple of PDFs and a couple of videos that you can reference on web courses to cover the little bit of material that I had for today as an alternate plan. There's a reading assignment out of Story by Robert McKee. It's not too terribly long. It's just a quick idea about writing with subtext. And then there are 3 videos. So I have what writers need to know about subtext. And then I have this really terrific video from Lessons from the Screenplay, who you may remember I've chosen to show you guys before. He's put together this thing called Mad Men, Layers of Meaning. And it's really interesting. It's about 15 minutes long. But it gives you some idea what Matt Weiner was thinking about when he was writing episodes of Mad Men, thinking about backstories and subtext and parallel storylines and things that were going on with a lot of the primary characters in Mad Men, while we were also seeing the typical week by week primary storyline, the one that is, you know, demonstrating all of the evolving story structure and arc and everything. It's a really neat piece. If you haven't seen Mad Men, sorry, but I kind of think everybody's at least somewhat aware of and maybe have seen an episode or 2 of Mad Men. If not, you may find it more difficult to follow, but check it out. I think it's pretty interesting. But we do have Betty today. Oh, before I say that, your homework is posted here. It's also, the reading is also posted in web courses. So without further delay, this is one of my, hopefully a series of special guest appearances. And today I want to welcome Betty Goldberg. And I will just quickly say that, again, you can access her IMDb. I've put the address here for you, imdb.com. And then if you put in Betty Goldberg, she, I think, appears at the top of the search list. But to refresh your memory of Betty, I think I told you guys once before, she has 20 years in the industry, over 20 years in the industry as an operative. And then we're going to hit a landmark for you, right? And coming up 20 years of teaching now as well, right?
No, 10.
10 of teaching. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we had some concurrent experience going on, which is great. That's terrific. I did the same thing. You have experience as a TV director, writer, and script supervisor. And we're going to take a little look at your career here. I'm going to post, I have a series of questions that I'm thinking of to ask to you, but once I stop sharing my screen, I'm going to be the only one that can see these. Hopefully you folks have come with some idea what you might want to ask Betty based on your own experience or your own objectives. And so I'll leave that up to you. So let me stop my screen share now. Stop the share. There we go. And now we should be back to tile mode.
Tile mode makes me very happy. Thank you.
Okay, good. And then I can see all my navigation this way too. It's really problematic when you share your screen to see all your navigation and stuff. Okay, so I will turn it over to you, Betty.
Okay.
And then maybe I can hop in with some questions after a while, and then we'll turn it over to the group for an open Q&A.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. My name is Betty Goldberg. I have actually been in the industry since I was 24, and I'm now 3,000 years old, so you can do the math. I'm actually 72, and I'm still writing, and I'm still teaching. And I teach motion picture production and television production because I worked on motion pictures as a crew person, as a very essential crew person called a script supervisor. And then I wrote for television for about 12 years. And actually my IMDb is not complete because I don't update it, because I'm a little bit of an outlier in the industry, because I don't really care that much about the industry. I care about writing. And I was a writer when I was in college. I wrote columns for the school newspaper, and they were my particular columns that were named, you know, whatever I named them. And then I started writing with my partner who ended up being the writer and director of the movie Field of Dreams, Sum of All Fears, Rhinestone Cowboy. His name is Phil Robinson. He's hugely active right now in television series. And I started writing movies for television, but I started as a script supervisor, and I wanted to, probably none of you really want to work on a film set. And when I say film, I mean television or film. But if you ever do, this book, Movie Speak, is a very funny book of lexicon and what they're using when they're on a film set, the phraseology that they're using when they're on a film set. And it was written by Tony Bill, who was one of the producers of The Sting, which is quite a famous movie. I also wanted to recommend a book to you. I know that, I don't know what you're called, Mike. I call him Mike. Are you called Professor Walsh? Is that what you're called?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah.
Your
I go by
honorable
PW
professor?
in my email postings. I just
Okay,
go by
okay.
PW.
Well, I don't know. I know he's recommended a Sid Field book, which I happen to think is one of the best books about screenwriting there is. And even better, there's a workbook. He has the book called Screenplay, and then he has a workbook, so you can actually do something and compare it to what he thinks you should be doing, which I think is very valuable. And I use the Linda Seeger book, How to Make a Good Script Great. After I've written a script, I then go back to the Linda Seeger book and I kind of compare what I've done with my script to that book. I think those are really, really valuable books. Also, any script, in my opinion, that if you can go to Simply Scripts or any of the script sites, and if you can read a script online, a script that you think is a great script, or when you saw a movie, you thought it was a great script, you can read all of those scripts and you can break them down. And I think that's really, really valuable. It's absolutely like set in stone that the first act ends between the page 15 and page 21. And in case you don't know why that is, it's because every page of a script equals approximately 1 minute of screen time. Comedies are maybe 50 seconds of screen time, because once a joke is made, it's completely over. And something like Bridgerton, Shonda Rhimes' new show, which is a melodrama, those scripts that are written for that last maybe 1 minute and 10 seconds per page, because they're melodramas. So when somebody says, an actor says, he doesn't want to see you, and then another actress says, he doesn't want to see me, and then the first actor says, yes, he doesn't want to see you. And then the next one says, I can't believe he doesn't want to see me. So it's sort of like goes on in a melodrama. But basically, the reason why the first act ends between page 15 and page 21 is because you're either 15 minutes or 20 minutes into the movie. And if the audience doesn't know the central question or questions of the movie by 15 or 20 minutes, they're going to start doing something else because it's boring. You're just watching a setup that's way, way too long. So I have one other book that that I think is kind of interesting. It's by Jeremy Arnold and Robert Osborne, and it's called The Essentials 52 Must-See Movies and Why. So I figure since it's 52, you could see one movie a week, and that's not so hard to do. And I just think that watching movies or television shows or pilots is sort of going to help you more than just about anything is going to help you, because you'll see something that doesn't work and you'll see something that works and you'll want to emulate it. So I started by being a script supervisor, and can you show me by raising your, not your virtual hand, but your real hand, if you know what a script supervisor is? Okay. Oh, great. Fantastic. So, it's a really, really complicated and hard job. And there's only one on every movie set or every television set. And you work directly with the director. Of course, the writers are almost never on the set. And the great thing that I learned from being a script supervisor was what part of the script got dumped and what part of the script got kept. So you have to understand that you probably already know this, that the motion picture industry is not a nonprofit industry. It is a profit industry. It's the motion picture business, and they're not kidding about that. So their goal is to, when you're producing something, all you're doing is transitioning the written script into visual images. Okay, we know that. So they want to do it in the tidiest, most time effective way in terms of, well, time and money effective way that they can make a project. So I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a script and somebody has written a scene that takes place in a bathroom in somebody's house. And two people, let's say it's two roommates and they're two women, and one's sitting on the toilet and one's brushing her teeth, and they're talking about the morning that they're going to have. They're talking about what they're going to do that day. And there are no other scenes in the script that occur in that bathroom. The writer just decided it would be charming and interesting to put the girls in the bathroom. The problem for the company producing this is that they have to build a bathroom on a set or go to a location where a bathroom is, which would be much more troublesome, because to get a camera and lights and two actors in a bathroom would be sort of untenable. So they're going to build a set on a sound stage and then of a bathroom, and then the scene will take place there. But if there's no other scene that occurs in the script in that bathroom, it's not worth their money. They will dump that scene. They will put the dialogue from that scene into another location that they're going to use multiple times. So one of the most valuable things I learned that I think really helped me become successful, I'm a good writer and I have good ideas, but I really had an inside understanding of how things are actually broken down and made on a set, whether the set is a practical location, which is a real place like a restaurant or a hospital or a school, or a soundstage location, which is where you're working on a soundstage on a studio lot and they're building the set there. I also learned not to write a scene that had 4 pages of dialogue, because that means, let's say there are 2 people talking to each other in the scene. If it's 4 pages of dialogue, it's going to be 4 minutes on the screen. And 2 people talking to each other for 4 minutes, unless they're giving us the secrets of life or longevity or something, nobody's going to watch that. That's very rare. When I teach my class about the motion picture industry, I divide it into motion, picture, industry and business. So I've already mentioned the business part of you. It's money, money, money. They already know when they give a green light to a film and the end of the development phase, which is the first phase of TV, of all production, whether it's a video, a music video, whether it's TV or film, they already know when they green light the film exactly how much time they're going to take to make it and exactly how much money it's going to cost. They actually know that in the second phase, which is pre-production. So to get back to motion, two people sitting in a room talking to each other for 4 minutes is not motion, unless the dialogue that's being said is incredibly compelling, and that substitutes as motion. But if there's no physical motion, it's hard for us because our lizard brain, when we're watching the screen, knows we're watching the screen. And it knows that it's not 3-dimensional, and it's sort of barely 2-dimensional. We're just watching a screen. It knows that depth of field can be created, but we're still looking at a flat screen. I mean, if somebody said to you, in the olden days when we were all going to movies, if somebody said to you, I have a great idea, let's go pay $12 for a ticket to a movie, and then, you know, whatever ridiculous price they charge for popcorn and a drink, and another $12 for bad popcorn and a drink, and let's go sit in a dark room with a whole bunch of strangers, and maybe one of the strangers sitting next to me is making out with somebody or eating with their mouth open. We do not know them, but let's go sit in the dark with 400 strangers and look at what we absolutely know is a flat screen. Well, we all do that. And we all do that because of various reasons. One of which is that we're being told a story, which in my opinion is the oldest profession on earth. I know people say that prostitution is the oldest profession on earth, but in the caveman days, we know from, I have a degree in anthropology, we know from artifacts in caves, we know from cave paintings were stories. They were stories about people hunting animals. So, and prostitution came way after cave paintings. So I believe that telling stories is the single most compelling thing for people. I don't know if anybody knows the story of Scheherazade, 1001 Arabian Nights. So I'm going to tell you this briefly. This is the power of story. So, and you can get this book. This is a book, 1001 Arabian Nights. And there was supposedly a king who ran his kingdom in the following way. Well, this is part of the way he ran his kingdom. He was very in favor of women in general, and he would get a woman and he would marry her and he would make love to her, and then the next morning he would kill her, which is one way to have a relationship, and that was his way. And everybody knew it in the kingdom, and all the women were terrified that when he picked them, they would be killed the next morning. So a woman named Scheherazade came up with a plan. And the plan was that he would marry her, and then he would make love to her, and then she would say, before we go to sleep, I want to tell you a story. And her plan was to have her sister, who was also probably going to get married to the king later and killed, in the next room. And she would tell the king a story, and she would stop the story. She would pretend to get tired and stop the story right before she got to the important part of the story. And she would leave him with a cliffhanger. And so he wouldn't kill her because he wanted to hear the rest of the story the next morning. And so the next morning she would tell him the story. And I don't know how her sister came into it now that I think of it. Anyway, and then that night they would go to bed, and his plan was to kill her again. And she would say, well, let me tell you another story because you like that story so much. She would tell him a story. before the story ended, she would say, "Oh, I'm so tired, I have to go to bed." And she would always stop at a cliffhanger moment. And 1,001 nights later, she was married to the king and they had, 5 children or something, because people want to know what happens next. That's a real human drive, is what happened next. In a movie, if you're shooting a 2-shot with 2 people, and one person says to the other person, "You're going to marry your mother's sister," all the attention would go to the person that person was talking to. And so the camera, the next shot, is a single of that person. So sometimes I call the motion picture business the emotion picture business, because the way movies are shot is that emotion drives the camera to where it goes. And emotion and the camera is telling the visual story. So bottom line, well, okay, so I jump all over. This is how I teach my class, my poor students. But so I started as a script supervisor and I worked on features. I was the script supervisor on Beverly Hills Cop, which was a really, really fun movie to work on with Eddie Murphy. And I worked on a whole bunch of TV movies and episodic television. And then I decided I wanted to direct. And so I lobbied very heavily. I was very, very young. I was 29, and I lobbied very heavily for somebody to hire me. And I don't even know if you know about this, Mike Walsh, but I got hired to direct 2 episodes of a television show, and they were fine. I mean, they gave me the Christmas episode. So after I directed my first episode, they gave me the Christmas episode. So that's some vote of confidence that they thought, that I was worth it. And then I did a very, very stupid thing. And remember, this is a long, long time ago. I don't know if you know the story, Mike. I went into the main office after I finished shooting for the day to tell them that I would meet them for dailies, which is when they show you the film that you shot the day before. And the secretary in the main office, there were a whole bunch of producers there and a whole bunch of writers, and it was this big sort of circular office. And the secretary said, and the door was closed to one of the producers' offices to whom I reported. And he was my immediate boss. And I started to go in and she said, "Oh, you can't go in." This is a terrible story. And I said, "How come?" And she said, "Well, they're playing a trick on one of the writers." All of them like this. I mean, it was just, it was a mix of shock and awe and being offended. It was because it was all guys except this one woman who was a hooker. So after that, I was Me Too'd. And I never got to direct again. After I finished my first directing episode, I had called several friends of mine who were production managers who could hire me. And they said, "Oh, congratulations, Betty. We're so happy you're directing. And we heard your first episode was really good. And they gave you another episode." And these were all production managers of series and people that could have ostensibly hired me. And after I did that, and that day when I went to dailies, that producer who had been assigned to me never showed up at dailies, and he never spoke to me again. And his name will remain anonymous. He's no longer alive anyway. And so after I finished wrapping the Christmas show, I called my friend who is a production manager and said, "I've wrapped and they're on hiatus," because the companies are usually on a break called a hiatus during the season, during the Christmas season. And I asked if I could get, I said, "So, we should talk about you meeting me. We can have a meeting to see if I can direct an episode of your show." And she said, "Great." And then about 4 days later, she called me back and she said, she was a very close friend. And she said, "I'm going to tell you the truth, Betty, you're never going to direct again. He has called everybody he knows, the word is out. They said that I was over budget, that nobody on the crew liked me, and that I was over schedule. And none of that was true. And I never worked again as a director. So I was in a pickle. I was in a really bad place, and I didn't want to be a script supervisor anymore because I had done that for a long time. And since I had written with partners in the past, and since I'm a writer at heart, I decided I would just try to start writing movies of the week or episodic TV again, or anything I could. And I made a really, really good living selling movies of the week, which today we would just call a non-episodic Netflix show. Like, is the 40-year-old version, not Virgin, the 40-year-old version, is that an episodic or is that a movie? I don't know. On Netflix.
It's a movie that they bought out of Sundance.
Right. Okay. So I just wrote movies, and I mean, they were called movies of the week, but they were regular movies. And I wrote several of them for television. So the different ways you can write for television are.
Before you get into that, because you kind of reminded me of one of the questions that I had for you.
Okay.
Which was, okay, so you told a very unfortunate story about how the tables can be turned on somebody when you try to play what's perceived as the game by the good old boys, and it ends up stinging you instead.
Boy, it was really, yeah.
They probably didn't like on the surface being shown or reflected back what their culture looked like.
Yeah.
So in the context of being a woman in that era, we're trying to work in Hollywood, which was clearly a patriarchal ecosystem. The choices that would have led you to make a decision like that were probably pretty stressful. In other words, I think at that point, there were very few women doing what you were trying to do.
There was only one other woman directing television at that time, and now she's the second in command at the DGA. Yeah. And
so unfortunately, what would normally go on unaddressed and unrebuked and and undiscussed behind closed doors, because you kind of brought it out into the open and sort of exposed them. I mean, because if they were in a meeting already with somebody that they were exploiting because of what their life choices were and making a joke out of that, when you turned it on its head,
it was a bad move.
It didn't bode well.
It didn't bode well.
It's funny because, I don't have to imagine. I know, I didn't start work in the 70s, but in the late 80s, I can certainly say that, the male locker room humor and the male potty humor complex and all of that stuff was very much the name of the game in those days. And I remember few women in the business when
there were no women. And when I was a script supervisor, there were no women except in the costume department.
Yeah.
It was me.
Hair and makeup, costume, and oddly enough, the script supervisors, at least in my world in those days, were all women.
Right, but on the set, because hair and makeup are in trailers and the costumer is in the costume trailer, on the set, it was me and 75 guys, which I loved. I got more back rubs during the 15 years that I was a script supervisor than I've ever gotten in my entire life. And I liked every single one of them, and I remember all of them. And Me Too wasn't happening then. And it wasn't at the surface. So, I mean, if a guy walked by and said, "You look hot today, Betty," or whatever, it didn't matter to anybody. I would say, "Well, I am hot, go to work." It didn't matter. Nobody thought about it. So it was a very different time, and it was crushing to me.
I'm wondering though if it was because they weren't taking you seriously. Whereas now, we have women DPs, women directors, women writers. Everybody is sort of sharing a little bit more of an equal footing, but once upon a time, it was very much not that way.
It was terrible. It was a terrible mistake on my part, but it's a really good story in hindsight. And I'm not really sorry that I did it because I'm not a huge fan of the industry. I'm not a huge fan of the people in the industry, but I am a huge fan of writing. And I've continued to write. And I wrote after that, I wrote for, wow, I wrote off and on for 20 years. I wrote from the time I was 30 till the time I was 50. And then I got divorced and I had 2 kids, pardon me, and I took care of them. And then I've pitched, I've been asked to pitch by several companies a few times. I pitched a couple of things for Lifetime. I pitched a couple of things for Hallmark.
That's interesting because we just did an exercise on pitching. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about, at least
Okay.
from your experience, what that was like to go in and have to, sell an
Okay,
idea to
so-
a studio exec.
Okay, so a pitch is a really challenging thing to do. I only wore cowboy boots when I pitched because it made me feel sort of more butch and tougher. And I really needed to go in the room feeling like I was on par. I was always pitching to men, always. And also, I have a friend who has produced 2 or 3 movies that I wrote. And she calls studio executives, this is an insult. She calls studio executives Christmas help. You know how during the Christmas season, they'll hire anybody
Yeah.
because there's so many people going to the stores in not COVID times. And she calls studio executives Christmas help. And I sort of agree with her because the executive to whom you're pitching cannot say, yes, I'm buying that, or no, I'm passing it. The job of the executive to whom you're pitching is to then tell their superior what the story was. So it's kind of ridiculous because they might not be very good storytellers, for all you know. And they might not know any of the references that you made when you were making the pitch to other properties or other old movies that were made. You know, in your pitch, you might say, I stole a little bit of this from, and then mention some classic film. The studio executive that you may be pitching to doesn't know that. But what you need in a pitch more than anything else, in my opinion, is a log line, which is incredibly catchy. When the first John Wick came out with Keanu Reeves, the billboard said John Wick, and his last name in the movie was W-Y-C-K, and it said John Wick, don't set him off, which was a play on words because the wick of a bomb is the same word but spelled differently. When you go in to pitch a story, you want to have maximum 2 to 3 sentences at the outside of what your story is. It could be boy meets girl, boy meets other girl, wacky hijinks ensue. And then it's about a guy who's fallen in love with 2 girls and has to keep them apart and doesn't know what to do. Well, that could be the beginning of a story. That could be something that somebody might find interesting. And if you cast it with, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, or I don't know, somebody, then that would be funny. Or if it was boy meets girl and boy meets other girl, it would be 1 boy and 2 girls. And if you got good stars for that, you could do some kind of movie about that. But they really want a log line. They really want a couple of sentences that catch their attention. And it's hard to write a log line. You can write a whole script and then you have to distill it down to what the fundamental conflict is and be able to describe a character and maybe a character's motive in just a couple of words. Just a couple of words. A heartbroken man, da 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 da. A woman searching for herself, da 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 da. when a town hires a young woman to solve da 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 da, you've got to set something up that has motion behind it. Pitches are very short, and in every pitch that I was ever in, and every in-person pitch, and I imagine they're the same on Zoom, I'm sure people are pitching on Zoom. You go in and you introduce yourself, or I mean, you go in with an agent or a manager, and everybody, says hello. And there's sort of some BS talk, how are you? How are things doing? And, whatever. And then there's a moment where somebody says, all right, well, let's hear this story. And you have to go from saying, oh yeah, I'm great. I just came back from visiting my kids in college. And then somebody says, all right, let's tell the story. And you have to go into performance mode. And performance mode is not necessarily what writers do. In fact, usually writers are loners and they work by themselves. So that's not gonna, and you shouldn't be expected to do that, but you are. That's part of what a pitch is.
And that's the need for your pitch to be very, very accurate and rehearsed, right? Because you don't want to go in there and wing it. That's
correct.
the thing
You rehearse it all the time. I don't know. Do any of you know about the Moth storytelling competition? There's a national competition. It's a storytelling competition. Oh, this would be really good practice for you as writers and for the pitch. Okay, so go online and look up the Moth, M-O-T-H. It's a national storytelling competition. Now, before COVID, you would go to a bar. They have them at bars, and you go to a bar and you put your name in a hat, and they pick your name. They pick 10 names out of a hat. And if they pick you, then you tell a 5-minute story without notes. And then there are judges there, and they give you an award for the story. And it's become a huge national thing. And now they have actors doing it, and writers of novels doing it. Anyway, it's a great competition, and it's a great practice. I have entered 3 times. I won once. And it's just fantastic because you have to distill your story down, make it really, really tight, and you have to rehearse the hell out of it. But that's just the pitch.
Because it looks like improv, but it's not really improv.
It's not at all improv.
It's only improv if you get selected out of the crowd to tell your story. Then
no.
Right?
You go having rehearsed a 5-minute story.
Right.
You've chosen it. Right. It's you didn't know you were going to get chosen, but everybody who puts their name in the hat has rehearsed their story. Also, when the email comes announcing what bar this contest is going to be in, and in LA, they were all over. They're all over the United States. They give you a theme. So your story has to be about a theme, or it has to relate to a theme. So the story that I won for was a story called, the theme was respect. And then the one I was chosen for but didn't win was another one. Anyway, the pitch is just the beginning of it.
It should be important to point out, though, that something that, so like when somebody says, because Hollywood is meeting culture, right? Everybody's got a meeting, everybody's taking meetings. If you're not taking meetings, it's perceived that you're not busy and you're not getting things accomplished. And it's very much it's the pretense is that it's all casual and everybody's just real happy to be there, and they're free and they're living the dream, and they want to just talk and share creative ideas. But the reality is, whether it's a coffee meeting or whether it's a Moth competition, you had better go in prepared for what you're going to talk about. And if you get the opportunity, you really need to knock it out of the park.
Completely
You can't
prepared.
do that by pulling it out of your butt.
No, you can't pull it out of your ass. You better have it all. You better have it all ready. But I do want to say this also, and that is that the first time I ever had a serious pitch, I brought in a treatment. Now, according to the Writers Guild of America, which I belong to, and I belong to for hundreds of years now, It's illegal for a studio executive to ask you for what they call a few written pages, which is a treatment described. It's a very, very short version of your story. They say it's illegal for the Writers Guild to ask for that, but every time you go into a meeting, they ask for that. And I always have it because I want to sell my story. I've never been penalized for it. Nobody's going to punish you. It's just some arbitrary rule that you're not supposed to give them writing that they aren't paying you for. But everybody I know who's a writer, when they go in the room, they have a few pages that they've typed up of their story, a very consolidated version of what the story is. And if somebody in the room says, do you have any pages you can give us? Everybody I know gives them 2 pages that they've registered at the Writers Guild anyway, so they're protected.
Yeah,
So,
which was a very important point a couple of weeks ago, was if you're worried about, because somebody brought up that question in class, if you're worried about sharing your ideas in a meeting
Yeah.
or with an executive, whatever, that it's real easy to protect your idea. And remember, I told you, one of the reasons I stress that you use Final Draft is because there's a widget in Final Draft where you can go right to the WGA and register your work. I think it's like
you don't have to be a member. Yeah,
And
you, but
do
I'll
not
give you
have
an
to
easy,
be a member to get a WGA number.
I'll give you even an easier way to protect your work that's much less expensive. If you write a script, or if you write a big treatment, like a 20-page treatment that really talks about the characters and the locations and the story in semi-detail, take it to the post office, mail it to yourself, certified mail, so that there's a paper record of it. When it comes to you, when it's mailed to you, do not open it. Put it in a drawer. And if you go to a party or you're hanging out with friends and you tell them your story and everybody's a little drunk or high or whatever, and somebody hears your story and they decide they're going to write that story, and a year or 2 later, you see that story on the screen, you can take your unopened script or treatment that you mailed yourself with certified mail and bring it into a court of law and say, this was my idea first. Now, of course, there would be arbitration because the laws around intellectual property are pretty rough. Nobody can prove, I can't prove that Benjamin Geller didn't have the same idea that I had on the same day, even if we didn't know each other. Nobody can actually prove that. But if there's enough material in my script that I mailed myself that turns out into Benjamin Geller's film, well, then maybe you stole my script, Benjamin, and you're going to pay for it, kind of thing. I mean, but that's one way of protect. That's okay. That's one way. It's a compliment because you thought it was such a good idea. That's one way to protect your work. So, but I want to tell
That's
you
very
this.
important though, because what did we establish in class is that the mail it to yourself method establishes a timestamp. On this day, I mailed something that had my idea enclosed within it. And the idea, because it's unopened, if you were to produce that as evidence in court, might stand up and it might not, depending on the judge's interpretation of the parameters of the case. But we talked about something even more important than your story, and that was your characters, right? Because lots of people rob banks, right? But not everybody robs a bank dressed like Richard Nixon, right? So that scenario and that kind of character that would do that sort of thing,
Right, those details
can be uniquely yours. So if you protect that idea, that's where, when somebody steals your plot idea, if they don't go so far as to copy robbed by Richard Nixon, right? There's room for interpretation that, well, lots of people can get the idea about people who rob banks. So the detail and the specifics are mostly the importance. Your characters, I think, are more easily protectable than your plots.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, people can steal stuff. I don't think they do it all that much, but you can find records of people, you know, suing other people. I mean, it happens all the time in music for sampling pieces of music. But
Yeah.
what I wanted to say was this: I was looking for an agent, because you really have to have an agent if you send a script without any representation, either either an entertainment attorney or an agent. They're going to put that script at the bottom of the bird cage for the bird. I mean, they actually legally don't want to read a script that isn't represented, because they could get in trouble. If you have representation, then they can read your script. And by the way, today, I have just finished a script that I've been working on for a long time. And it's in its, I don't know, 5th rewrite, but I'm closer to sending it out now. And I don't have an agent anymore, because I got rid of my agent years and years ago. Probably 10 years ago, when I started teaching, I was sort of done with writing, and I didn't have something I wanted to write. And I figured if a company called me, which Hallmark Films has asked me twice to pitch an idea to them, they give me a prompt and then they want me to pitch the story. I figured, well, if they want to buy it, then I'll automatically find myself an agent, because if I go to an agent and say a production company wants to buy something from me, of course I'll get an agent, because then they get part of that. They want a working writer. But what I'm going to do with this script now, although I do have connections, I'm going to try to go to a really small boutique writers agency instead of one of these huge agencies like CAA or ICM, because I actually think the people in the small boutique agencies are working harder. They want to work at ICM, they want to work at CAA, but they haven't gotten there yet, and they're looking for material. And now, for all of you, as long as COVID's around, and COVID's going to be around for a while, this is a perfect time, because there's so much content and everybody's looking for content. So I would look for a writing agency that is small, because they're more apt to be looking for work, because they want to build their business, rather than send your script to CAA that's, you know, a 50 billion story building in Beverly Hills with 80 gajillion, you know, people who are already there. I mean, you're just really a spit in the pool. Go to a smaller place, research
opposite could
them.
also be true. The opposite could also be true. They could be expats from CAA,
Yes,
tired
yes,
of the big corporate model,
exactly.
tired of the dance, the tentpole dance, and the overbloated budgets, and they might want to work small because they want to be closer to the creativity.
And there's research that you can do. I mean, if you really wanted to be sort of crazy about this, you could look at the list of writers' agents. Let's pick CAA for the last 10 years. You could look at the writers' agents. You could look at the list of who the writers' agents were, and then see if you can find those names in a smaller agency. In other words, see if you can track where somebody left a big agency and joined or started a smaller agency, because then you know they really know what they're doing. But hungry is hungry. If you're hungry, you're hungry. If you're a small agency and you're looking for writers, you're hungry. So my logic is just to go to them.
I got a writer friend who just recently paid $2,000 for what they call the phone book. And it's a yearly updated list of active producers who are buying, who are actively in the market, and they're connected to studios that are buying and working. And the numbers are good. The problem is you pay for access. It's like $2,000, $3,000 for this list. And it's a good list. The names are all good, but
well, before I would pay for anything, I would really try to get, I would register my work, and I would I would pick 5 small agencies, and I would research them, because you want to become a student of what they're doing, because you want to look good in their eyes. And I would send a very short cover letter. A long cover letter will really go on the bottom of the birdcage. Send them a very short cover letter. And in that cover letter, you can say, I have followed the work of the agents in your agency. I know where they, I'm a student of the people who are agents at your agency and the work that they have sold. And I would really like to be associated with you, as opposed to, and I really want you to buy my script. Stroke them a little bit and say, I want to be affiliated with you because I respect the work that you represent.
Even
Who
better,
wouldn't want to
reference some
hear?
of their work, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
who
really
wouldn't want
like
to hear
your
that?
recent production of
Yeah.
X, and I have written a script similar that I think you might be interested in. Because in other words, you have to research them, because you wouldn't want to send a script for, you wouldn't want to send Up in Smoke to the Hallmark company to be produced
Right.
in
Oh
TV
no, the
movie,
Hallmark
because
company.
the genres and the production company don't mix. So
No. Yeah,
definitely target your audience.
yeah. There's what's the company? Oh, it starts with a P. It's not Paradigm.
Paradigm.
Is that the name? There's a company in Hollywood. I'll get the name of it and give it to you, Mike. One of my sons worked there as an assistant for a while, and they're known for doing socially relevant material. So if that's something that your script is, or that you want your script to be, there are companies that are just doing that. Scott Budnick, who was the producer of Hangover 1, 2, 3, 4, not the finest art films that were ever made. He has now started a company called something like Hollywood Films, and he only wants to produce films that are about race, gender, inequity, all of those categories. That's what his interest is, and that's his company. I'll get you both those names, Mike,
I have
after.
a question for you based on
Uh-huh.
something you said a minute ago. One of my questions to you was, I'm switching glasses, I'm getting serious here.
Uh-huh.
We're talking a lot about scripts and pitching those scripts, but have you ever pitched an idea and either gotten paid for the idea without the script, or been commissioned to write the script after you pitched simply the idea?
You sent me that as a question, and I can't remember if that's ever happened. However, I have been pitched an idea by a production company. One of the best scripts I ever wrote that they didn't make was a CBS network asked me to write the following movie because I had a really good reputation. After I took my shirt off, I stopped behaving that way, and I got a really good reputation. And I'm very good in a notes meeting, which we can talk about in a minute. I went to CBS and they said, we want you to write a movie about what happened in 1979 when protease inhibitors,
Oh my God.
which were the first drugs that made it possible for people with AIDS to not die. We want to make a movie about when protease inhibitors were invented and when the medicine was applied, but we don't want it to be about a gay person. God forbid that it should be. This is a long time ago. And they said, we want it to be about a straight person who gets AIDS somehow, we don't know. And he divests himself of everything he owns, which is what happened to a lot of people who got AIDS because it was like a death sentence. And then protease inhibitors gave them their life back. And so I wrote a script that I think to this day is probably the best script I've ever written. And they shied away from it. It was way too political and sexual and so and so. Another company came to me and said the following. Years ago, an actor, a very famous actor named Rex Harrison, was married to a very famous actress, and he had an affair with another actress. After he had the affair, he felt really badly about it. And he went back to his wife and he said, I had an affair and it's all over, and I'm so sorry, and I want you to take me back. And she said, for reasons I don't understand, she said, oh, okay. So he went back to live with her. Shortly after he returned to his wife, the woman with whom he had an affair, who was also an actress, got cancer and was given 6 months to live. And the woman with whom he had an affair called him and said, I want to spend the last 6 months of my life with you. Will you leave your wife again and come and spend 6 months with me? So the guy told his this is all real. The guy told his actress wife, so the woman I had an affair with has cancer. She wants to be with me for the last 6 months of her life. How do you feel about it? The wife said, okay. He left her. He spent the last 6 months of this woman's life with her and then went back to his wife. A company called me and said, we want this to be a movie of the week. It's called Leave of Absence. I wrote it and it got made with Brian Dennehy and Jacqueline Bissett, who at the time were pretty big actors. And they said, but it can't be about movie stars. We just want a story about a man who has an affair, goes back to his wife, and then finds out the woman that he had an affair with is dying, and he leaves his wife again and then goes back to his wife. And I said, I will write it, but at the end, he can't go back to his wife because his wife won't take him back. I just can't handle her taking him back twice. And they said, okay, go write it. That was literally the conversation we had in the room. Not, what does the guy do for a living? They couldn't be actors. They didn't know what anybody was going to do for a living, where they lived. It was just this weird prompt of a tiny, tiny outline. And I did a lot of stuff like that. I wrote a lot of stuff where people just, somebody in the company has an idea of a story and it's 2 sentences long and they give it to you and you write a script. And they buy it. And I sold a bunch of stuff like that. So, but what I really wanted to tell you was about the first thing that I sold, which was I wrote a script that I thought was a pretty good script. And it was sort of a legal script and about a woman who, it doesn't matter. It didn't sell. I brought it to 2 producers. I got an appointment somehow with 2 producers. I guess I had an agent at the time. I honest to God don't remember, but somehow, and I'm very, you can probably tell, not shy. I've literally written letters to production companies saying, I've locked my little brother. I don't have a little brother. I've locked my little brother in the basement, and I'm going to make him stay there until you call me and make an appointment with me. Literally. I'm very, very, I'll write anybody and say, I mean, you have to be careful in this day and age. It worked. It worked.
Really?
I mean, the thing is,
I think you'd shock and mortify somebody today if you sent them a story
well,
like
you couldn't do that today, but I would write a letter to somebody saying, I am a student of your production company. I admire every single thing you've done. And I think I try to be funny and I say, I think you are making a mistake that you will regret for the rest of your lives and your children will regret it if you do not have a meeting with me. And I will be calling you next week to follow up. And then I call and then I say, hi, this is Betty Goldberg. I sent you a letter. I've been that person my whole life because how else are you going to get in the room, man? I mean, you can't just write, dear sir, I'm so interested in working for your company. Sincerely, it's just nothing. You're a writer, you're an inventor, you're a storyteller. So you start with the first letter you write somebody. Tell them some fantastic story. Last week, I was kidnapped by a group of 13-year-old girls, and they told me if I didn't try to pitch their story, something terrible would happen. And then the next paragraph says, disclaimer, that did not happen, or maybe it did and they released me, but I have a very good story about young teenage girls. Boom. Now I just made that up on the spot talking to you. But if you're a storyteller, you got to get in the door. And if you're a storyteller, then get in the door with a story. and make it outlandish. But, you know, write a letter that says, I'm here to tell you the sad truth. I actually wrote Star Wars. Very few people know, but if you let me come in for a meeting, I will explain exactly how it came down. And I just made that up in my mind. I would do anything like that to get into a meeting. I really would, because
I think the point is, if you're talking about an exec who takes a dozen meetings a day, let's say pitch meetings, after a while, they all kind of start sounding the same, don't they?
yeah,
And at
yeah,
some point, you have to distinguish yourself.
you
So you can
absolutely
try,
have to.
you know, you can try outlandish remarks and notes and things, whatever you feel within the realm of propriety would capture someone's attention, and do a couple of things. First, stand out from the pack. Two, show your creativity, right? And show your,
Exactly.
you know, and show your earnest and willingness to, you know, to want to
Right.
meet these people.
Right.
So
So anything you could do like that. Anyway, I went to pitch to this company, and I gave a great pitch. I had all the acts broken up. Pardon me. And I had a really good thumbnail sketch of the major characters and everything. And they did something that I've never seen happen before, ever. They passed in the room. They usually say, well, we'll go talk to our studio executive and find out. And they just said, no, we're not. It was actually, the reason they passed in the room, because it was a story about a woman who lost her mind when she was premenstrual and committed a crime, and she wanted to use it as her defense. So they didn't want to make that movie. I thought it was a really interesting story, but that I wrote, that they didn't want to do it. When I got home, I got a phone call from one of the producers who said, your story was so tight and it was so well done. We're totally not interested in the subject matter, but if there's anything else you have that you think you might be interested in pitching to us, we would love to hear a pitch from you.
that's rare.
That was very, very rare. I had written a script about a boy on a friend of, I had a baby, and my husband and I had a best friend that was a couple, and they had a baby, and we had been best friends with them for a long time. And I hated the way they raised their baby. And it divided our friendship. It wrecked our friendship.
Hmm.
And one day I said to my ex-husband, who was my husband then, I said, I'm going to kidnap their baby. And he said, genius idea, Betty. Really good thinking. What would you tell that baby when it grew up? I was kidding. I wasn't going to kidnap it. And I said, I don't know. I'd tell the baby that it had died in a fire and that it was in heaven, and that my house was heaven and it was living with me and we were in heaven. And then when it got old enough, I would tell them that we were really in the real world.
Oh
And
my
he said,
God.
I sold this story. This was the first script I ever sold.
Wow.
It's about a young man whose parents die. He has a developmentally disabled sister, because I've volunteered my whole life with developmentally disabled people, so I know about them. And he needed help on his farm, and he had been adopted, and he kidnapped a kid that he knew was being sent from Chicago to the Iowa adoption place where he was adopted from, and he was going to kidnap a kid. And then when it got to his house, he was going to tell him, the kid, he didn't know if it was going to be a girl or boy that was going to be transferred to this place, that they were in heaven. And he was going to tell the kid that they were in heaven. And I had, by that time, I had met an agent, and she said, well, what do you have? What do you have that you might want to sell? And I told her one story, and then I told her this story. And she said, I said, well, I have a very non-commercial story, but I'll tell it to you anyway. And I told it to her, and she said the following, and this is the greatest lesson I can give any of you. She said, which story that you just told me is the story that you love the most? And I told her that it was the story that was the non-commercial one. It was about kidnapping a kid and telling them they were in heaven. And they made that movie. And that movie They always change the titles of your movies, by the way, almost always. I mean, they didn't change the name of Star Wars, but be careful. Don't get too in love with your title, because it's very common for them to change the title of the movie. In fact, maybe put a title that's your third choice. And then when they say, well, let's talk about another title, then maybe you can bring in the title that you really like and they'll choose that. And it was called A Little Piece of Heaven. And it was with Kirk Cameron and Cloris Leachman and a whole bunch of other people.
Oh,
And it got, huh?
We just lost her last week, Cloris Leachman.
Yeah. And then here was the real irony in the story. When I finally pitched it, this farm boy who goes to this orphanage from where he had been adopted, 20 years before, when he goes to kidnap this kid, he puts a little sleeping pill and a cookie under the kid's pillow, and the kid finds it, and he goes and gets the kid, and the kid is Black. And he didn't expect the kid to be Black. So not only has he kidnapped a kid from an orphanage, he's kidnapped a Black kid. I wrote this when I was 37. It was the quirkiest. So how long is that? That's 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And they made it. And they show it. I mean, it was an amazing thing. So, I mean, I could tell you a whole bunch about writing. I can tell you quickly, my process is 3x5 cards. I put every single scene on a 3x5 card, because that way I can move them around and adjust things. I do an outline kind of, but my outline is 3x5 cards. I don't know if you can see. Oh no, that's the wrong direction. It's on a bulletin board, and I have a 3x5 card for every single scene, and I write down who is in the scene, what's happening, if it's day or night, if it's interior or exterior. And then I can see the flow of something. And at the end of Act 1, I put up a separate card. And at the end of Act 2, I put up a second card. And if I'm really focused on beats, which I think are more in my head than are like a writing practice, but I would note that on the cards. But my best advice I can give to you.
Here's my recent novel, Betty.
There you go. Right. That's exactly it.
But you can sort of see I have multiple, incidences, and
yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, that's how you do it. And then you can
dollar store.
And then you can start writing, and then, you have to, you can find the time that's right for you, but I think it's probably just easier to make a time that you're going to sit down every day. And if you write 1 word, or if you write 5 words, or if you write 6 pages, it doesn't make any difference. From 3 to 6, or from 6 to 9, or 9 to 12, or whatever it is, just sit down with your story. But I never, ever have written a script without putting it all on 3x5 cards, ever. And I will tell you briefly, if you sell something and you go to a notes meeting, this is my technique. And I'm a pretty honest person. When you go to a notes meeting, there are often a whole bunch of people in the notes meeting. And so obviously, everyone's going to have an opinion, because everybody does have an opinion. And I just say yes to everything, because that's my strategy. If they say, well, we think you should change this to this, I go, oh, okay, that's a good note. And then I write it down, and then I do the notes that I want. And guess what? When you turn it back in, they can't remember what notes they gave you. So be amenable, be warm, and be accepting. Oh, that's a good note. And write it down. Maybe it will work. But you're the writer. You're the writer. There are people who, if they could be writers, they would be writers.
Yeah, right.
But they're not. They're studio executives, which is a non-creative job. So write down what they say and say, thank you very much. Good note. Let me see where I can work that in. If it's the ending of a scene, or if it's something really significant that you can't like fool around with, then you can do half of the note, or you can do part of the note, or you can take the note in your way. But this is also, okay, so I'm 72. This is a little awkward. I'm going to show you this. This is I don't smoke, unfortunately. I quit, which is tragically sad to me. And I don't drink coffee because I had to quit that too for health reasons. So,
You did.
and I don't want to bite my nails because I don't want to. There's just hardly anything left to do. So I buy silly putty by the gross, and I play with it all day long while I'm writing. I twist it and I turn it. And if I ever win an Oscar, I'm going to promise all of you right now, and you can sue me for lying, that when I collect my Oscar, I will say, I play with silly putty when I write because it helps relax.
Silly putty.
I also drive. Sometimes if I can't think of an idea or I get stuck, I get in my car and I drive, and that really helps. Sometimes I take a walk, and that really helps. And here's my last tip. I know it's the end of your class. My last tip.
I want to open up for Q&A if we have time. So
okay, when you write your script, when you finish it and you've registered it, however you're going to register it, give it to 4 or 5 people that you trust implicitly and tell them that you've already registered it so they can't copy it. And have a list of closed-ended questions like, when did you get bored? Meaning page number, okay? Because it's a script, so it's all, who was your least favorite character? Who was your most favorite character? What struck you as confusing? What didn't you follow? Ask them closed-ended questions that are a little skewed to the negative. You can also say, who is your favorite character? Did something make you cry? Did something make you laugh out loud? Because if you give a script to anybody you know, they will tell you they like it, no matter what they think of it.
right.
They will tell you they like it, and you won't get any help. But you want help from just average readers, from non-movie people. So give them your script with closed-ended questions, and you'll get the truth. Because if you give it to 5 people and 4 of them say, I got really confused on page 57, great, then you have a consensus and you can look at it. Because once you've written it and you've read it a million times, it's very hard to step back from it and have a real point of view. So that's my story. Okay.
That's why I put it in a drawer and I don't look at it for at least a week if it's something short, and longer if it's a longer format. So let's open it up if anybody has a burning question. I can keep going with mine if we don't have anybody, but I'd like to know if there's anybody right now who has a burning question that they would like to have answered.
Nobody. Oh, Natalia.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
First of all, I want to say that this is a wonderful experience, and I really like this sharing and
Oh, good.
having the opportunity to meet you.
Oh, good.
So I have a couple of questions, but I'll just go ahead with the main one that I have. And is that, do you feel like, do you regret what you did, like with the shared, or was that experience helpful to find inspiration for doing other stuff or for keep creating, but in another way?
No, I regret it because I really did want to have my hand at directing, and I thought I was a good director, and I had wanted to direct, oh dear, big cat fight outside. And I wanted to direct, but it did inspire me because I didn't have a choice. I had to have another job, and I've always been a writer. And so, and really secretly, the script I'm writing now, if somebody bought that script and they offered me a lot of money for it, I would try to negotiate to direct it. I'd say, I'll tell you what, instead of giving me $100,000 for the script, why don't you give me $5 and let me direct it? That's what I'd say.
And
Yeah.
then pay me to direct.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I would like to direct again, but I also have a little bit of a, I'm not so enamored with the industry. I'm not interested in being massively rich. I'm not interested in really being famous. I mean, if I got an award, that would be a nice thing. And I will submit this, if I can't sell it, I'll submit it to Sundance. I'll submit it to any contest I can. But it was a really stupid thing and I was really young and it makes a good story. So I do regret it though, because I did want to continue and I like the idea of breaking barriers. And Betty Thomas, who was the other director when I was starting out, and she was around my age, she handled herself much better. She was much more mature than I was. And she's become a huge television director. And now she's second in command at the Directors Guild of America. So also on a financial side, if you become a member of the Writers Guild and you sell, you'll get a Writers Guild pension when you're as old as I am. And that's a really nice, I mean, if you make a living at the Writers Guild or the Directors Guild, they give you a pension. And I still get residuals. I just got a $716 residual, and that's not nothing, from a movie that I sold to Lifetime about 25 years ago called, I forget what it was called because again, they renamed it. It was with Mia Farrow and it was about a girl who gets hooked on opioids. And they showed it in some foreign market and I got a really nice check for it. So, and I got really nicely paid
Not
when
bad.
I did.
Not
Yeah.
bad.
Mhm.
Ben, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Oh, Natalia had a couple more, but
Oh, go ahead. You can ask the rest of yours. I had one for later.
Okay.
Oh, sure. Like, how do you got to the point where agencies or production companies were reaching out to you to pitch an idea or like to write something for them? Like, how did you start it with?
well, the first thing you have to do is write a script that somebody's interested in. And the reason I told you the example of the unlikely script that I sold, this crazy, weird script about kids kidnapping kids and pretending it's heaven, is my age is because you're gonna just have to don't write what you think is commercial. Don't write what you think somebody wants to read. Really write the story that you want to write. It's going to get changed anyway. It's never going to be exactly the same story. I never watched the movies that I wrote on TV. Never. I didn't want to. I saw screenings of them in the offices, but they're not, what you write is very different than what's on the screen most of the time. And that can be kind of disappointing. You know, Brad Pitt's interpretation of the character that you wrote for this man is going to be his interpretation. And it is a collaborative art form, right? It's Picasso didn't ask anybody what they thought of his paintings. He just made his paintings. But the director is having input. The actor who has been trained as an actor to interpret the material is having their input. The director of photography has their input, and the people who are paying for it have their input. So by the time you get your project gets made, there's a little bit of heartbreak in it because it's never quite your project until you get really, really, unless you're somebody like Eric Roth, who wrote Forrest Gump and a million other movies, and then sort of nobody really argues with him. But still, actors interpret their work. So you have to write something that captures somebody's interest, and then often they will reach out to you. People who win contests, contests at Sundance or other writing contests, have people respond to them. And then that's something else that you can say when you write your introduction letter to a small agency is, I have won 3 writing contests and I won $1 million for each one. And then, of course, they know that's not true or something to catch their eye. But I think entering contests in this day and age is a really, really good way to get your work recognized, because they're panels of professionals who are judging the scripts.
Hopefully.
Well, but here's the thing.
You gotta
Everybody,
be strategic about your choices though, right? Because
that's
those
true, but
festival is probably not going to have working LA professionals judging scripts.
no, well, that's true, but remember, why does somebody want your script? Reverse engineer this. Do they want it because they want to read it before they go to bed? They want it because they can sell it for money. It's the motion picture business. It's not the motion picture nonprofit. So if somebody sees a script that they think they can sell, kaboom, then on your, even if they're not that experienced themselves, if they think that they can make money with your script, they're going to go ahead and try to get action on it. So I would say, protect your script, register your script, send it to a small agency, or write a letter of inquiry to, I think the company is Paradigm. I'll get the name of it, or Scott Budnick's company, and say, for instance, I happen to know, between you and me, that Scott Budnick has created an organization called ARC, which is the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. And he is neck deep in getting people out of prison who were, put in prison for 25 years for having a joint, okay? Or an ounce of weed or something like that. So that's his raison d'etre. That's his passion.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's already made a movie about that. So write a movie about something that has to do with that, and send it to his production company. He has readers there who will read stuff, but he wants to do socially relevant films. If I were a person of color, I would go after all of the people of color who are producing. I'd send a script to Shonda Rhimes. I'd send a script to every production company that featured people of color, or people who were disenfranchised, or if there is somebody who's a crazy feminist who's runs a company, I would try to find, if I have an idea, send it to them and get them to respond to me. But you remember, they don't want it for a bedtime story. They want to sell it and make money. So that's good news for us as writers, because if we can write something that they can make money off of, then they're going to have interest. They don't have interest in us as people particularly, but they have interest. That's a product that they want to sell. So, okay. Benjamin?
Yes. So I'm not sure how much experience you have with this, but what would you say is the different process for getting a job in a TV writer's room versus selling a script individually?
Yeah, getting a TV writer's room job is really hard. The experience I have is that one of my sons got a job as an assistant in a TV writer's room. And it's very, very, very hard. Again, I think you have to show them something that you wrote. My guess is that one way to do it, and I know this used to be the way to do it. So let's say when Breaking Bad was in its heyday, when it was only in its 3rd season or something, if you could write an episode for an episodic that's already been mounted, it's already got an audience. If you could write an episode of that show that they love, that showed them that you understood their zeitgeist, for their show, and that you understood their characters, and you could probably get a hold of some of the scripts. There's a library in Los Angeles that you can contact called the Margaret Herrick Library, HERRIC. And they have every script that's ever been written for television or features in the history of television and features. And they're closed now because of COVID, but in their archives, I don't know if you can see some of them, but somewhere online, I bet you could find scripts for some of the shows that are on now that are ongoing, like The Good Wife or whatever the spinoff from that was, or something like Blackish might be a really good show to write for. And they've got a spinoff now, which is Oldish, and they're doing a show about old people. And if you knew who the characters were and you knew what sort of the storyline was, then I would try to bang out a script for an existing show and say in your cover letter, I was going to disguise myself as a delivery man to get into your writer's room, but I realized that I would only be there for 5 minutes and it wouldn't work for me. So I'm submitting this this sample script and hope that you will consider me, and you will be hearing from me shortly. The other thing is, waiting for people to call you is like tantric sex or something. It's just never gonna, it's just sort of never gonna happen. It's just gonna go off in the clouds. You have to really, really chase what you want. If I send a script to anybody, I'm going to call them. And if they say, well, we haven't read it yet and we'll call you next week, I will say, oh, okay. And if they don't call me next week, I call them. Hi, it's Betty Goldberg again. And after a while, and they know you're not going to stop calling, they'll read your script. It's happened to me before. You have to be so proactive, and you can't be kind of humble because you're not that great yet. Golda Meir, who was the prime minister of Israel after she was a housewife in Michigan, said one of her quotes that I really love is, "Don't be humble, you're not that great." So you can be humble when you're Jeff Bezos can be humble, or Elon Musk can be humble. Of course they're not, but you're not famous enough to be humble and say, well, I don't want to bother you. Yeah, you want to bother him. You just want to have class when you bother him and don't take off your shirt in a meeting, that kind of thing. But, you know, it's very, very hard to get in a writer's room. Very, very hard.
You don't know Ted Sullivan, Betty, but when I was doing my first documentary, Ed was cutting for me as an editor, and he was kind of moonlighting at ABC, cutting for them also, and cutting interstitials like top of the hour, bottom of the hour, check out our next TV show on ABC on Thursday nights at 8, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. And writing spec scripts for, there was that law drama, the courtroom drama. What was that one? Law and Order. And they had a Law and Order spinoff going on at the time. And he was pumping them spec scripts for Law and Order. And they finally picked one up, and then they picked another one up. And it took him, and so then they started inviting him to write. They were inviting him to write scripts for them for that show. And ultimately he ended up in the writer's room on something for ABC. And then he went from the writer's room to a showrunner, and he wrote like 2 or 3 seasons of, I think it was Revenge.
Well, now
he started, you know, in the door,
right.
cutting interstitials for them. He wasn't even writing.
Law and Order, Chris Maloney is coming back to Law and Order. Thank the Lord. I haven't watched it, but I'll watch it now that Chris Maloney is back, because I love Chris Maloney. And my guess is because he's returning, they're going to have a whole different feeling, because this old cop is returning to the police station to work. I'm sure they'll play it like that. So anything like that. Also, let people know what you want. Don't, you know, get a job as an assistant something and then not tell anybody that you want to be in the writer's room because you don't want to tell them. Say, I'm here because I eventually want to be in the writer's room. That's my goal. Let people know, because you don't know what's going to happen. Somebody's might have to leave and have a baby, and you've been working as an assistant in the office, and they say, you know, that guy, Ben Geller, yeah, he wants to be a writer. Does he have any samples of work to look at? Yeah, he sent some in. Well, let's look at them. I mean, there isn't one way that it happens. It's not just nepotism. It's not just that you wrote a great script. It's all sorts of different ways. In fact, my son was the assistant, the production assistant in the writer's room, and or the writer's assistant, and it was for the television show Get Shorty. And they were considering him, and took a bunch of ideas for him. He would call me every day when he would say, oh, I just gave him an idea for a way to end this scene and they're using it. He was so excited. And then the show got canceled and everybody lost their jobs and had to go to other jobs. And now he's actually trying to get into grad school as a writer in a writing program. But you have to let people know what you want, and you can't be embarrassed about it at all. You just have to, if your eyes are on that prize, then I think it's really valuable to you to let people know.
I would offer this too, and you can probably verify this or you can refute it. But I think when you write spec scripts for an existing show, one of the things that it will show a producer is that you understand their characters and their character arcs, right?
100%.
Because if anyone can write a one-off and it can be pretty decent, you know, but it's your characters, your situations, and your scenarios. And so it's, you know, who knows how long you kicked that idea around and refined it and edited it before you gave it to somebody. But if you send somebody a script of a show that already exists, that's being produced with characters that have already demonstrated arc over
100%.
time, and you nail it, that's how you show them without any, you know, ambiguity that you understand. First of all, you can write, but you also understand how to read the subtext, which was the other, you know, the alternate plan for today, the discussion. You understand the subtext, you understand what motivates the characters, which therefore determines how they speak and react to with other characters. And you can pick up where they leave off, and you can offer them a scenario that slots right in and seems very seamless with what they might have done 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes ago.
You know,
I think that sort of cements you, right?
100% I agree. Another thing you can do is, people generally like to laugh. I'm just saying, I've noticed in my life, people really enjoy laughing. If you make a send up of something and it's really clever, like let's say you made a send up of Stranger Things and you called it Even Stranger Things. And it was some funny show that was a takeoff on something. People will look at that because they have familiarity with something, and they think, oh, somebody has turned this on its, you know, on the other side, and they'll look at it. I mean, you could write a series of send-ups of commercials and submit that, some really, really funny commercials. So I think that taking something that already exists, whether you write an episode for the show, and I agree with everything that Mike just said, which is very valuable. It means it's one thing to send in your own original thing. Like Mike said, you've been working on it for, you know, 4 years. Obviously, you know that script, but to be able to perceive what the feeling is for somebody else's script and show and their pace and their characters, I think that's very, very valuable. Very valuable.
Part and parcel with what you said a little while back, I wanted you to sort of either confirm or again refute the notion that if you're on the outside writing spec scripts and you've never been published or you've never been bought or you've never pitched successfully, you're still kind of an unknown quantity. So would you agree that once you've sold something at some level that there's an unspoken sort of transition that has happened to you, you've become in some way vetted? In other words, somebody at some point invested money in you for something that you created, and that makes them look at you in a different light. So it's going to be hard, like they say, Warren Buffett will say it's hard to make your first $1 million, but it's easy to make $10 million.
Mhm.
The first one, that is the big one, and that's the one you have to be absolutely tenacious about. But once you've made that sale, right, it kind of breaks the ice a little bit with you and some of these studios, to where you're no longer an unknown quantity, which I think is why IP now is the name of the game in LA, where if you've sold a novel, you have an idea they can capitalize on 3 ways from Sunday. You have a built-in audience because you're a book writer who has sold copy, and you're vetted by the marketplace. If you're on the New York Times bestseller list, you're a proven saleable commodity with a built-in audience, and you can write. And so
Well-
you're vetted, right?
And I would like to add to that another thing, which is I have optioned books. I've optioned children's books and I've optioned adult books. And I almost sold one to Disney, and I pitched it to some Disney executives, a children's book that I optioned called Kaleidoscope, that was written years ago. And I pitched it to 2 agents and I optioned it. So when you option a book, if you read a book that you like, you call the publisher and you say, you don't have to be anybody. You don't have to have any degrees. You don't have to be a writer. You don't have to be anything. You can call and say, I'm a freelance writer and I would like to option your book. Again, it's all about money. And they will say, well, if you can afford it, you can option it, unless somebody's already optioned it. And an option is like you're renting the rights to own the book. You don't own the book, but you're renting the book. Let's say you get an option for 6 months. And in that 6 months, if you can write a script based on that book and you can sell it, boom, then you're in. Then you have gotten somebody else's story and you've turned it into a screenplay and it can be sold. Shrek, okay? Have you all seen Shrek, the cartoon? That is a really, really famous children's book by a guy named William Steig, who's written 1 billion children's books. And they made it, and it was out for years before somebody optioned it and made it into a movie. So you can look at any kind of children's book. And of course, children's movies are huge now, right? Because either animated or not animated. I mean, that's a big, big market. Children, especially now that everybody's home and they're going to be home probably for another year or two. Option a book, call the publisher and introduce your, or send a letter and say, I'm interested in the option rights for the following book. Can you please tell me what a 6-month option would cost, or, Google option letters so that you can get a sample of what option letters look like when you're requesting it. And I optioned Kaleidoscope. I think I got it for $500 for 6 months. And they wanted it at Disney. And about a week before our second meeting, which was, I thought, going to be like the big thing, those 2 people got fired. And each
At
of them
Disney?
went, huh?
Your contact at Disney got fired?
Yeah, my 2 contacts at Disney, they got fired and they each went to different companies. And of course I contacted them, but they weren't interested. The people there weren't interested anymore. But there's something that there's a book called The Morality Play by a man named Barry Unsworth that I think is a slam dunk English series. And I'm interested in optioning the rights, and I've inquired and no one owns them. So now my next step is to find out how much they would cost. And then I'm going to ask around to some people who I actually know in the industry and ask them what they think. Do they think that that anybody might be interested in it? I think it would make just a brilliant, brilliant series.
What's your strategy for researching whether a book has been optioned or not?
My strategy is to call the publishing company.
That's it? Straight up cold call them?
Straight up, or send a letter. Yeah. Yeah. Has this book been optioned? And a lot of them have. A lot of people option a book for a year or 2 years. They pay the money to reserve it, until they can find the correct market for it, or they think it's the right time, or a writer who can write it or something like that. But you can find out of date books, you know, that are just wonderful. You can option the rights to a song. If you have, you know, a singer or a song that you think is the most brilliant song in the world, and you want to make a movie about it, and you have an idea about how you would actually do that, you can call the publishing company that publishes the song and see how much it costs to rent the rights for a song. So, I mean, there are a lot of artists now.
Wasn't that how they made, was it Crazy Heart, or was it T-Bone Burnett had written a song and inspired somebody to write the movie, and then they
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
collaborated in that way? I think it was Crazy Heart.
There's a rapper right now whose name is J. Cole. I don't know if you know who he is, but I happen to think that he's a really sensational storyteller. And there's one song of his, which is called Wet Dreams, that I think would make a wonderful short film. It has a real surprise ending. And there are a lot of songs that you know, you could make into a short. That's another opportunity. Maybe you can find a contest where you don't have to write a 115-page script, which is really a lot of work. Maybe you can write a short. Maybe that's a contest where you can just submit a short. So that's something to do too.
I think that's where the internet is really starting to shine and offering
For
people
sure.
a venue, because like websites like Omeletto, for instance, where you can write a 6, 8, 10-page script and turn it into a short, which then gets broadcast over their website as a short film. And you can garner an audience, and you can sort of get your, you know, cut your teeth on short story writing that gets, you know, and have it produced.
And
There's a
people
whole
are
market
looking
for
at that.
shorts. There never used to be a market for short films like that before.
Well, and even if it's not a market for short films, people in the industry, the studios have people who are searching for product. So they're looking at those websites to see, oh my God, we just saw a short film that somebody made, and it was original, and it was dynamic, and it was blah, blah, blah. They're looking for that because they want to sell it for money. And
Sure.
that's a great thing. I mean, it's great to know that they're actually looking for what you're doing, not because they like you, not because they're interested in you, because they want to sell your product. So, I mean,
Now, having said that, right?
yeah.
So you've got a good idea. It plays well on paper. It reads well. The characters are compelling. But let's talk about, for the sake of the remaining audience here, your writing still has to be impeccable. In other words, you can't turn in a garbage manuscript with spelling errors and grammatical errors and
Oh, yeah.
poor elocution, you know, unrealistic wooden dialogue. You have to turn in a document that is, for all intents and purposes, mechanically perfect.
Well, I wouldn't say, I think perfect is a high bar. I think you're giving too much credit to the people who are reading it. It has to be mechanically proper. It has to be the proper format. Obviously, we have spell check now. You have to learn, you know, have somebody read it once it's registered, to edit it, to correct your errors. Because once you've seen it, once you've looked at it 100 times, you don't even notice that you left out like half of a sentence because it was in your head or something. Yeah, it has to be professional. And
I'm talking about the chronics now. Like, we all know that occasionally a typo can happen because spell check is not a perfect plugin. But if you're chronic, like if you just have absolutely no idea how to punctuate, that could present a problem in terms of your professionalism. Would you agree?
yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that somebody who wants to write a screenplay can't punctuate properly. But again, that's when you can give it to somebody who's a friend who's good at finding those mistakes. You know, I mean,
In other words, there's so many mechanisms for you to eliminate those chauvinisms from your work. It's hard enough to write a good screenplay, but if they're also having to negotiate your poor comma applications, or the fact that you just have no idea that there's an auto format select in Final Draft, and so your indents are never right. Since we have all of these ways of fixing those simple problems,
The format
should
has
do
to
it.
be, the script format has to be correct, but,
Yeah.
but Final Draft will do that for you. Final Draft makes the script for you. It indents your parentheticals or where your parentheticals should be, your voiceovers are. I am in love with commas. I would,
Yeah, me too.
personally, I would like to put a comma after every word, just because I like commas. And
It's not the dramatic pause anymore.
so, and also language changes. I listen to a wonderful podcast called Lexicon Valley, and it's all about language and how language grows and changes and the use of words. And it's very, very interesting. It's there's an African-American man named John McWhorter who does the podcast, and he's a genius. He's a linguist and a semanticist. And he talks all about the fluidity of language and the fluidity of punctuation and all of that. But if you can get Final Draft or another formatting, film formatting thing, don't number your scripts. I would say
No.
that's very important. Don't number your scripts. That's the
Writers don't
job.
number scripts.
That's the job of the production company, and make sure that
And directors
every
number.
scene begins with what's called a slug line, and a slug
Mhm.
line has interior, exterior, the location, and whether, and you can put same day or night, or when the day changes in your story, you would put interior, exterior, a location, and then next day or next night. And I would never put, I would never put a camera direction in a script, like angle on so-and-so, unless it's absolutely germane to the story. Unless someone is putting their hand in their pocket to get the knife that they're going to kill somebody with, I would not write close up on, Mike's hand going into his pocket. No camera direction. That's up to the people, that's up to the filmmakers. Your job is just to say, this is the scene, have the characters and parentheticals if you want. There's nothing wrong with voiceover or off camera or any of those things. Occasionally, when you write a transition in a script, which is like a dissolve or a fade to black or a fade in, a dissolve in particular makes a difference, because it gives a person an idea that visually in your storytelling, that the image is going to fade away and something is going to come in. Well, that's a beautiful, artful part of storytelling. So transitions, fade to black, maybe a whip pan, a dissolve, stuff like that, that I would include in a script if it was germane to the scene that you're writing.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would just write cut to, and that's all, and just use,
Thank you.
I use Final Draft. So, and that's the one I
I've
use.
given them this. I fell in love with this book. I gave them the orange cover, which is the prior edition, the third edition. I have the fourth edition, I think. This is like basically everything that you want to do with Final Draft, and it's in terms of questions you can ask of it about formatting and stuff. And you can see I've got a lot of stuff highlighted, because
Right.
this is like, I think somebody, it was Courtney, I think, asked a question about, she sent me her beat sheets, and she had some supers direction in her beat sheet. But she didn't know that it was called a super, and she didn't know that there was a way to present that within the context even of a beat sheet. And this book tells you how to manage,
Right.
spring 1944, if you're writing a period piece and that's your title card over your opening shot, right? That's called a super, and there's a way to present that in your script document. And a book like this will help you with that. Sometimes Final Draft doesn't know necessarily that you're trying to make a super. If you say spring 1944 on it, and it'll put it in an action line instead of making it a super and giving it
Right.
the flag. But
Right.
this will tell you exactly how to format it in case Final Draft doesn't quite help you correctly format that direction, because that's something that's pertinent to your story, but it's not an action line, it's not in the dialogue, and that's where the gray area starts happening with the auto formatting and Final Draft. So
But
this becomes the excellent companion to your Final Draft
But
software.
again, I have to say, if your story is compelling and you can capture people on the first 5 to 10 pages because it's interesting and it's different, or it's recognizable, but you can't figure out where it is, maybe it's a regular love story, except it's between two people who are living underground or something, that if they get an idea of, oh, what's this? Just a little bit of that is in your script. If it's not technically perfect, that's going to be fine. I would never want to scare anybody away from telling a good story because their format wasn't 100% spot on, because you will learn how to do your format. And if somebody's interested in your script and they ask you to rewrite it and make it, and say, we need a slightly more professional version of this, great, then you'll get it. Your script is going to be changed so much anyway. They're going to cut stuff. They're going to add stuff. I mean, when I wrote A Little Piece of Heaven, which was actually called Honor, when I wrote it, it was called Honor Bright, because in my husband's family, when there were 4 boys, and when they said something to their parents that their parents doubted was entirely true, the kids would go, Honor Bright. And Honor Bright meant, I'm telling you the truth. And I thought it was such a beautiful phrase, Honor Bright. So that's what I named the script. And the characters said Honor Bright in the script. And of course, they called it A Little Piece of Heaven because they told this kid they had taken him to heaven. When we were on location, we were writing it on location. And actually, it took place on a pig farm. And I had never been to a pig farm. So I flew to a pig farm. I made a contact at a pig farm, and I flew to a pig farm and stayed there for a couple of days, stayed in Iowa on a pig farm or near a pig farm. And I learned something about something that happens on a pig farm, which I didn't know, which has to do with a certain kind of bird that can make, that when they poop, if the pigs eat it, it makes them very sick. So they have to keep a certain kind of bird away. And I used it in my script. It was such a valuable addition. And I changed my script. Then when we were in the table read, which is all of the heads of the departments and all of the actors are reading the script page by page by page to figure out what's going to be required for every scene. We need a tractor, we need a farmhouse, whatever. Okay. Cloris Leachman, who just died, who is a big actress, turned out she was a vegan then, 35 years ago. And she said, oh no, it wasn't that she was a vegan. I'm sorry, she didn't eat pork. It was some religious thing. She didn't eat pork. And the whole movie is written on a pig farm. She said, well, I don't eat pork. Can we change it to cows? And they actually started to have a conversation in the table read about, well, maybe we could find a farm. And I said, no, people, this is my script. I wrote this script. This is a pig farm. And I'm sorry you don't like to eat pork. You don't have to, but this is a pig farm. And they kept it. But there was real discussion because actors carry a lot of power.
Especially now.
Because the actor wanted to change it. And in the story I told you about with Jacqueline Bisset and Brian Dennehy about the guy who has an affair and everything, I wrote it about architects. That was the person I chose. So the woman who has the affair with the man is an architect, and she's a real outlier architect. And I wore her wearing clogs, And I wore her wearing a loose tie when she worked in her firm, sort of as a fuck you to the other people in the firm, like, fine, I'll wear a tie, and then maybe you'll respect me more, even though I'm a woman architect. Anyway, she was a really sassy woman. So they hired this actress, to play the role. And I was there on the first day of shooting, and she walks on the set and she's wearing an Armani suit. I mean, a stunning Armani suit. And it was kind of a taupey gray. It's like, what the hell? Did you not read the script? Well, it turned out that when they hired her, she said, well, I'd love to be in this movie, but I won't wear clothes like that that's written. And they were written because I believed that that was what that character would wear. She wanted to be in people's face about who she was. And she did it partly with her clothes. And the actress wouldn't do it. And so for the whole movie, she wore these boring ass, gorgeous Armani suits. And I changed some of her dialogue as a result, because since she wouldn't let me make her look not weird, but different, you know, a little iconoclasty, I had to make it in her dialogue, which I had not wanted to do in the beginning. I wanted her to seem to all the men in her law firm, from listening to her, that she was one of them, but have her look a certain way. And that was her message, and the actress wouldn't do it. So
there's an interesting lesson, right? So you write a piece of material, and it's about the costuming, right? So in terms of the story, there's going to be other people in the food chain. Someone's going to have thoughts about the lighting. Somebody's going to have thoughts about the camera angles. Somebody's going to have thoughts about the wardrobe, the makeup, the hair, the props, right?
it's a collaborative art form.
Nobody will, no one out of any of the craft departments, no one will ever say, oh, well, that character would never say that. That's the one thing that's under your purview.
Yeah.
You know, and even the directors in many cases won't go against that on the written page. It's particularly if they are directing something that they wrote themselves.
Oh,
Okay.
well, yeah.
Like an Oliver Stone, for instance, who's like, say the words on the page. I don't care what your reinterpretation of my dialogue is. I wrote this because I wanted you to say these words. The words are, you know, those are iron. So
there are some writers who go to the set, they sit in a director's chair all day long with a paper, their crosswords, and they just sit there waiting for the script supervisor to sidle up to them and say, the actor's trying to change the dialogue. Just thought I'd let you know. I mean, that's the script supervisor's job to say when dialogue is changed. And then that writer will get up out of their chair, and they may be willing to change it, but only if they can change it. If a big, powerful actor, you know, we treat actors like they're infants. We all kowtow to them like they shit silver or something, pardon my French, but we really act like that. And they're just people, just like we are, but we act like they're something special. So if an actor says, if a big actor, if Jennifer Lawrence, who I don't even think is that talented, but that's just me. If Jennifer Lawrence, who gets $20 million for a film, she's just a human. She gets $20 million for a film. If she wants to change the dialogue, then she can work with the writer, and the writer they will compromise on dialogue that she feels comfortable saying. But that's definitely a real thing. If big actors, after they've read the script and accepted the script, they've signed on, which is what pisses me off. It's like, you read the words and you signed on, and now you're on the set and you say, oh, I just don't really feel like that's what I would say in this instance. I mean, I'm hysterical about that. My feeling is, screw you, just say it. You're an actor. That's your job. Your job as an actor is to not be yourself, is to do what the character, which is a created entity, would say. And I know the character because I made the character up. But if they're a real powerful actor or actress, you have to make compromises because
Yeah.
it's not Picasso alone at a canvas. It truly, truly is a collaborative art, and you're part of the collaboration. So,
I did a film called Basic in 2002, I think it was 2003. Sam Jackson, John Travolta, Connie Nielsen, bunch of people in this movie, directed by John McTiernan. McTiernan directed all the Die Hard movies and a whole bunch of stuff. So here's this massive director and the actor Travolta. So where there was a scene that happened in a mess hall. It takes place on a military base, and everybody's in the service. They're in a mess hall because there's been a crime committed, and the guy they think committed the crime is being interrogated in the mess hall by Travolta and Connie Nielsen and somebody else. And so in the middle of this whole thing, John decides he doesn't want to say what's been written on the page. And so he starts going back and forth with McTiernan. And McTiernan, when he shoots a scene, he shoots everything 50 different ways. We used to call it going through the box of lenses, because if it was a shot in this direction of Travolta walking into the mess hall, walking up to the table, sitting down and addressing the guy in cuffs, he would shoot that with five to 10 different pieces of coverage, different size lenses, and getting all of this stuff of this event happening. Travolta had very strong ideas about what he wanted to say and what he didn't want to say. And it got to the point where those guys were fighting so bad, they would leave the set and they would argue for hours and come back. And we're all kind of hanging out, waiting for them to come back. We're trying to light things. We had producers over there ask, can we shoot anything? Can we get some inserts or something? Can we, what can we do? And it took us 2 weeks to shoot that scene because of the debates and the arguments that were going back and forth.
well, and that's
a powerful actor and a powerful director.
And that's precisely why I wasn't that sorry that in hindsight, why I'm not that sorry that I stopped directing. There are so many people in the industry who are such complete jerk-offs that life is short and I have better things to do. And someday one of my sons is going to have children, or else I'm going to have to hurt them. And then I can be a grandmother, and then I don't have to think about anything. But it's a real collaborative effort, and you just can't. If you become a super, super, super famous writer, then you can be in love with your work, and every single word can be exactly the way you want it to be. But until then, you better write something that's really, really solid and good, and it's still going to get changed. It's still going to get rewritten to some degree or other. And also they can hire another writer to totally rewrite it. And then you go into arbitration at the Writers Guild. And I've been in arbitration at the Writers Guild. I was rewritten only once in my whole career. And I didn't fight it. It was for Hallmark, and I really don't like Hallmark. And I just backed off and said, fine, they had paid me, fine, somebody else wants to write it, I could care less. All the Hallmark movies are interchangeable. They all look absolutely the same. They have no Black people, they have no brown people, they have no gay people, they have no Jews. It's like white America. It's like a Hallmark card come to life. Anyway, but then I was asked to rewrite somebody else's movie, and I did a page 1 rewrite, and I was taken to arbitration. And the director of the movie went to the arbitration and fought on my behalf, and I lost. I did not get credit on that movie.
Wow. Page 1 rewrite is the whole rag. It's the front to
The
back.
whole thing. And I was I was at the table read as the writer. The other writer was fired. I rewrote it. I was in the table read. It was with Candice Bergen. It was a really nice movie. A big TV director directed it. And the guy, the original writer, got something in his butt, and he didn't want me to get credit, and I didn't get credit. I got paid, but I didn't get credit. But these things happen. It's a collaborative effort. And You get to be the boss of your life when you're all by yourself. And the minute somebody else comes in, it's all about compromise, you know? That's just the way it is.
Sean Penn wrote a novel a couple of years ago. Ed Honey Say Stuff or Do Bad
Yeah.
Things or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so the interviewer said, so how come you turned to writing novels? And he said, so I don't ever have to collaborate again. So if you don't want to collaborate, write novels.
Yeah, it's hard, but it's exciting too. It's really exciting to be part of the process. And if you can maintain your integrity, which after I lost mine trying to be a director, I maintained my integrity as a writer. And I still have a lot of people that I can call and submit a script to, even though I don't have an agent anymore. I have 2 or 3 really big producers who would be happy to read my scripts because I worked with them. So, and it's just been a long hiatus for me, but I have 1 script and 2 children's books on the burner. So, and I just quit my job. I've been teaching for 10 years and I love teaching and I love my students. I fall in love with every single one of them the minute I see them, even on Zoom. It's the weirdest thing. I thought, oh, this is going to be all screwed up. I'm not going to be able to connect with my students. And then I see them and it's like, oh, I feel completely connected. I don't know what that means, but I just gave them my notice because I want to go back full time to writing. Because all of a sudden it dawned on me, well, what better thing to do is in a pandemic? I mean,